think Clevenger's my guy. Okay, that's what it is. But there were other guys. That's the only one that come to mind. But I went through looking to pick up guys on the DL because I picked up for nothing. Like I actually, because I was fairly healthy this week. Because I picked up Johnny Cueto just to stick him down there. Probably no help really in roto leagues, but this is a head-to-head league, and he might be pitching.
I don't know, dude. I like Cueto a lot, and so the early reports that I've heard about Cueto out of San Francisco, he's dropped like 25 pounds, during the rehab process.
The rehab, everything I've read about his rehab is that he's ahead of schedule and he's doing really good. And it's like they originally said, like he said that he'd be back by September. They said no chance this year, and now people are talking like he's saying he could be back by August. They're saying he could be back by September. I love Johnny Cueto, dude. He's one of those guys that he's not going to have to come back and throw 100 miles an hour with that Tommy John. He's going to have to come back and throw 91 and then throw, 14 different pitches at different speeds and angles and give you the leg shimmy. And I love Cueto, what he brings to the table. And he's one of my favorite players. I mean, it's in a league where by fluke, it's in a head-to-head league, but where by a fluke I'm 8-1. And it would take a minor miracle for me not to make the playoffs. So I can afford to just go, all right, what am I going to do when I'm in the playoffs? I know that if you're 4-5 or if you're in a roto league, you don't have those kind of luxuries.
No, I get it, dude. And like I said, I'm just clawing, and I'm doing the same thing in Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational. I look at my team, and it looks so good. I got all these, great players, but then injuries have just devastated me this year. Absolutely devastated me this year. Like I said, I just lost Correa. I already have Chris Davis down in that league. I have Giancarlo Stanton, who's been a black hole for me the whole entire season. It's just
that's a guy I tried trading for Stanton. Yeah, that's one guy I tried trading for.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we talked about Matt Olson a couple weeks ago, and we thought that power was going to be sapped from the hamate bone, but he's just come right out of the gate. He's got 7 homers already. You know what I mean? So these guys with that big power, man, it plays. And so hopefully a guy like Stanton, when he comes back, we're looking at the same type scenario. Maybe we could be looking at him in a month or two, and he's got 15 homers or something like that. So
I play in 5. I play in 5 leagues that I own by myself, and there's 2 that I co-manage with somebody. And so I have a good number of names of guys that I picked up. But here's some names, like wherever Jackie Bradley Jr. was available, I picked him up because I think he's about to hit that hot streak if he's not already in it.
He was on a historically bad pace.
That's why he's available. Don't get me wrong, but the last 3-4 games he's been hitting, and when he hits, he could be like a top 20 player for a little while. Not for the season, but for a little while. I believe in him. I picked up this guy that I believe in for reasons. I picked up Addison Russell in a number of leagues. I think with Zobrist out on
Addison Russell just bothers me. I don't know why. I don't know whether it's the. I don't necessarily think it's that. This is a domestic dispute. I never really liked him before that. I never really thought he was that great of a player.
The thing about it is, like, there's one of my theories. Like, I know how to predict a good player when they have, like, progressing skills. Look, he's hitting the ball harder every year, or if he's getting a little bit older and his power is coming, whatever. But the reality in Major League Baseball and thus in fantasy is that sometimes players come out of nowhere and become great players. And if you look at those guys, and I call it the Scooter Gennett rule because he was like he's like the poster boy for this. But there's a lot of those guys that, hey, we didn't think this guy was really good. They're guys that are pretty much on their last leg. Like they need to prove it now, and somehow they do it.
Tommy La Stella, Hunter Dozier comes to mind.
Hunter Dozier's not quite on his last leg left, but there's a lot of these guys.
Yeah, but Tommy La Stella was. He was basically considered, a utility infielder up until this season.
Yeah, I mean, the Cubs actually, there was a big stink last year because even though he set the record for Chicago for most pitch hits in the history of the franchise, they didn't put him on the postseason roster.
Sucks. You think you would? That's a valuable tool to have in the postseason, especially.
And the year before that, they actually sent him down. Like in August, before it brought him back with the 40-man. It's like like the Cubs were thinking this guy's out there. I mean, the Cubs did that with like DJ LeMahieu, and he went to Colorado and became a Colorado product. But there's these guys. So whenever somebody is at this spot where they're at this crossroads, I'm not saying they're always going to hit, they're going to be good, but you can't afford. Justin Smoke's one of those guys. Like, he was crapping.
He had that win good season 2 years ago where he had a lot of hype.
No, I'm saying that season 2 years ago was that season for him. He was in that Scooter General. He was highly touted.
Dietrich comes to mind this year as the same kind of player.
Yeah, and the same before the season I was on him because it's like he did enough in Miami. It's like he should, if like this is his shot. Like he's looking at, I got to make it work here, or I'm going to be selling insurance in a year and a half, or something, right? And I always say, I don't want to say that means that they turn to drugs to help themselves out, but if they were in that situation and they did turn to drugs, you'd go, all right, that's against the rules, but I don't really blame you when you're.
I don't mind it for the 25th man guys that end up being productive and maybe sign a $5 million contract. That's good for their career. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with that. They're not going to the Hall of Fame because of those numbers. That's kind of where I draw the line at it.
There's nobody who's more up against the wall in baseball this year than Addison Russell. The Cubs don't need him. If the Cubs don't need him, he was out for a good part last year. He came into training camp ready to take this thing over. He hit like 390 with like 4 home runs in spring training. He's about to play that. Then he got that thing, and then he served his 80-game suspension. He wasn't put right into the starting role, but the Cubs' best lineup is, if you really look at it, is going to have Baez at short and Russell at second, and Russell's been hitting. Well, he's been hitting while he's been there, and I mean, you're looking at a spot where you're in a league where you're looking at picking up like the Yolmer Sanchez's or the Jose Iglesias of the world. Though Iglesias actually hasn't been that bad.
He's actually not been bad.
Russell has this upside thing that the other guys don't have. That it's like we at one point in time we bought the idea that Addison Russell would be a potential number 3 hole hitter, right?
Sure.
At one point in time, and it looked like and his glove is still there.
I mean, the A's ended up looking really stupid there for a little bit. I think that he was part of the Jeff Samardzija package, if I'm correct. Because Addison Russell was originally an athletics prospect. I remember when they drafted him, it was a big deal. But they apparently saw something they didn't like in him. But then he had a couple good seasons with Chicago, but he never had any great seasons. They were just good.
Right now, he's only been playing for like 2 weeks. He's been 275 with 4 home runs, 6 RBIs, and 7 runs scored.
Well, that's good. That's good. Nothing wrong with that.
I mean, the 4 home runs in that period of time is probably that's since May 20th. That's the best run he's ever had in his career, probably. Or very close, very close too. So he's a guy that, it costs you nothing to pick him up. There's a chance you're going to reap something really big with the guy, and in 3 weeks you decide to cut him. You decide to cut him. No harm, no foul. I mean, he's available everywhere. So he's a guy that I'm kind of high on. In a league that's a little bit deeper to fill the same role, I took Neil Walker, who's quietly hitting pretty well down there in Miami. He's hitting 300 driving the run. He's probably the best hitter on their team. Well, no, it's not true. There's a couple guys in Miami.
Neil Walker's been decent this year.
He's been the Neil Walker that you expected 2 years ago with the Yankees. The problem with that is that he's never going to hit the home runs. Have you looked at the guys who've been playing center field for the Marlins? Harold Ramirez. He's kind of an amazing guy. So he's played now today is his 13th game of his career, right? And how many of those games would you guess he has not gotten a hit in?
I have no idea.
He's only not gotten a hit in 1 game, and he's gotten multiple hits in 6 of them. But I gotta check to see if he did today. Nope, he went 1 for 4 today. So this is a guy that was actually he was a top 100 prospect. He's like 28 years old now. He was a top 100 prospect back when he was 23, and he was in the Pittsburgh system. And he was actually he got into their top 10 as the top players, but they traded him to Toronto to get Francisco Liriano. Remember that deal? I mean, you don't remember him,
sure?
But when they moved, and when he got to Toronto had Anthony Alford, these other names up there, and there was kind of he isn't really known for having power. He was just a good contact hitter who had speed, but now he's getting older. The speed's not quite as good. So he wound up getting released and signed by Miami, and Miami finally gave him a shot this year. And he's been playing since the 21st, and he's hitting 400 with in his first 50 at bats. He's 20 for 50. Now only one home run, 3 doubles, but that's still not that bad. And the truth is, he's that guy who's up against the wall. He's a guy that got rejected in Pittsburgh, rejected in Toronto. It's like there is no doubt when Derek Jeter opened the door for him, he's like, "This is my last shot." I don't want to say he's taking drugs, but there's no doubt he's got the preeminent amount of focus, and he's a guy to look for.
I mean, it just sucks that baseball more than any other sport we really make such a big deal. I mean, NFL, if a guy gets popped for PEDs, no one remembers. Like, no one thinks about it. I know there's been just a lot of conversations about this in the past, but I just want to touch on it. I just thought it was funny that you're talking about it in that context.
Oh, who's the guy that I didn't pick up? Who's the guy that just had his first game? You see, Cesar. You're talking about rookies. Cesar Puello's first game. His first game with the Angels, rookie, older rookie too. He's like 28 or 29. He went 3 for 6 with a home run and like 4 RBIs, like one of the best first games ever. It's like, where do I remember that name from? It's like he was one of the guys that was popped in the Biogenesis scandal. So maybe, he along with like Everett Cabrera and Jesus Montero, Johnny Peralta, Nelson Cruz, those guys. It's like, well, maybe he's he's gotten his drugs into his system and he's ready to do this thing.
I hate pointing the finger at guys and assume they're doing drugs with no proof. I really don't.
I'm not saying he's did, but we can already say that he's already been caught once. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, all right. Well, speaking of guys that are in that mold, do you feel like Avisail Garcia is a guy who might be taking drugs? Then I mean, just because he's having a bounce back season from what he's always been that talked about guy that we think he's going to be good. We think he's going to be good. We think he's going to be good this year. He's actually been good.
But he was really good 2 years ago. Like he had that one really good
decent batting average year. Yeah.
He had a good season, and last year he wasn't bad, but he missed a lot of time, and the average was down. He was a guy that always hit the ball hard, and I think that was what Tampa Bay. I remember reading this thing about Tampa Bay. Like last year, when it came to like velocity off their bats, they were like number 26 out of 30 as far as like the weakest off the bat. And so the reason why they went after Avisail Garcia and they went after Yandy Diaz, who we both like, I know that, is because those guys are notoriously hard hitters. And when you hit the ball hard, sometimes good things happen.
Sure.
I play in some deeper leagues, but Avisail Garcia was on my draftable radar in almost every league. Admittedly, you play in a 12-teamer, you're not going that deep yet. But the truth is, the numbers that he's put up so far this year, he's rosterable in any league out there, outside of maybe NL only. And I do believe it's there. People used to call him Little Miggy. That's what
I remember. Trust me.
That was what everyone thought about him coming up. But the guy hits the ball hard, and good things happen, and the Rays saw it, and I trust the Rays.
So you talk about 2 years ago, it's 2017, and you kind of think about that as, like you say, his breakout season. He did post that 330 batting average, but that was with a 392 BABIP. You can't necessarily look at that and say that was sustainable. It was proven as much last year when he went down to a 271 BABIP. Mind you, this year it's almost a 340 BABIP. So I just don't know if that's the player he is.
But
the
way I look at things, I go, once a person hits 330 in a year, he has the potential to hit 330 in a year. It doesn't mean he's a 330 hitter, but once a person does something, even if Aaron Judge never does it again, he's always going to have potential for 50 home runs.
You're right, 100%. Just because he's done it before, and just like Bryce Harper, that's why everyone drafts Bryce Harper every year, because you just hope it's going to be the year that he's going to hit 330 again to go along with those 30 homers. And it's 400 crazy on base percentage.
And the truth is, like, the more we know about BABIP, there are some things that drive a higher BABIP. One is the speed, but the combination of hitting the ball very hard
and into the gaps. Yes,
and not hitting many fly balls.
Yeah,
those